So, and now I'm asking our moderators to come on stage and welcome a person where I'm really happy to have him here. We know each other since many years, and I had the honor to take over the responsibility for the 5A ecosystem more than 6 years ago, personally from him in Brussels, and handing over to our moderators now to introduce our next guest.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you already introduced him very well. So please welcome on stage Pearse O'Donoghue, Director of the Future Network Directorate of DG Connect at European Commission, who will be delivering a speech on how to deliver the European data strategy and the contribution of Gaia-X. Welcome. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and it's a privilege to be here. It's also great that I'm speaking now because I've been able to absorb so much from the great sessions that we've heard. It's not that the Commission never gets the last word, but in this case I can hopefully reflect and wrap in so many of the intersections from what has been presented this morning to what is the overarching strategy of the European Commission with regard to the digital economy and data in particular. Because the von der Leyen Commission is coming into the home stretch of its mandate, but when that Commission took office in December 2019, they didn't waste time in tackling priority areas such as, and particularly, data. Only 3 months into the mandate, in February 2020, the Commission adopted the European Data Strategy. And I want to reflect a little bit on what has happened, but also what has become the role of Gaia-X embedded into that strategy. Because the Commission set out a vision for creating a genuine single market for data, a trusted single market for data, and a functioning single market for data. And that, of course, has guided our work over the last 3 or 4 years with a series of actions, putting in place what we hope are the right rules for data governance, investment in infrastructure for data storage and processing, of course, as well as building the data spaces on the basis of European values that we have heard about so much. So we hope, and the judgment is in your hands, that we have delivered on these promises, at least most of them. But action or the words in policy documents is not enough. We actually need you, the industry actors, to actually implement the vision. And that is why Gaia-X is so important. Through Gaia-X's core components, lighthouse projects, national hubs, Gaia-X is developing a very broad reach within the European Union, and we actually hope to see that develop further. But what is already clear is that Gaia-X has long outgrown its Franco-German parentage, and I think we've seen from the dynamism, for example, of what is happening here in Spain just now, that is proof of that vision developing into a European-wide concept. And with that broad reach, Gaia-X has established itself as a forum for exchange on how to achieve our objectives of an open, transparent, but secure federated digital ecosystem. And this is where concrete deliverables are key to leveraging Gaia-X's position and therefore key to the Commission seeing its vision implemented. We had the example earlier in the year of the Market-X conference, which showed what a clearinghouse can do. We have the Gaia-X compliance and labeling framework, which has also set in motion work towards a trustworthy digital framework as well. And those successes show that Gaia-X has a real capacity to deliver, and of course to help us in our strategy. If we talk briefly about that strategy, obviously it recognized cloud computing at the backbone for innovation, for growth, for sovereignty. But it's no good setting up the infrastructure unless you are actually going to use the data, use the value that it presents. So cloud is an essential underpinning for the data policies. And that is why even recently we've pushed through with the Digital Decade Policy Programme, where we've committed to pulling Europe's average businesses up to a 75% cloud adoption rate by 2030. And as we look towards 2030, we also have to look and take account of latency critical applications. By 2025, 80% of data processing will take place at the edge. And that is a fundamental shift at the edge of the network. We foresaw that in the data strategy. We're now preparing the ground for it with the aim of having 10,000 climate neutral and highly secure edge nodes deployed across Europe by 2030. Now that edge technology was in its infancy 5 years ago. We have had to mobilize industry, many of you present in the Alliance for Industrial Data Edge and Cloud, in order not just to get to know each other, but to face up to the challenges of this edge deployment for positioning Europe at the edge, at the cutting edge of that technology. We, for our part, we've deployed all of our investment programs, research and innovation, obviously, infrastructure deployment, both with the Connecting Europe facility and now, of course, the Digital Europe program, and then cloud federation services and data spaces with Digital Europe. And member states, of course, have also recently been proposing an important project of common European interest, the IPCEI, where we expect a decision within weeks. And this virtuous circle of various initiatives between the availability of novel data processing technology, the development of European data spaces, is really essential if we are to achieve our goal. But we need actors from the private sector to come together, such as is the case in Gaia-X. We've heard already about the Data Act and where, again, with the role that the Commission has in setting a framework for this work to be done, we have sought to identify a series of levers that are important. Obviously, the right infrastructure, as I've said, and also then the lack of interoperability as it existed in today's cloud market. And that is why the Data Act's reply to that particular problem, we heard about it this morning, was in relation to interoperability and switching. Just yesterday, as Hubert told us earlier on today, the Data Act was voted by the Parliament, so it is now going to enter into law. And as we move towards implementation, not just on cloud switching, in fact on all of it, there is a big role for Gaia-X to play, and for its individual members, and for its lighthouse projects. Because the Data Act removes the barrier that keeps cloud users from switching between different cloud services providers. By the same token, it provides greater flexibility with regard to the implementation of data spaces. Not just, of course, therefore, moving from one provider to another, but from multi-cloud usage, which will also be a feature with regard to the data spaces environment. So that seamless cloud switching is another lever, another plank in the data strategy at which Gaia-X has to push its own weight. But of course, the Data Act is a point of departure. It's not a point of arrival. Again, implementation and the involvement, the implication of stakeholders in the industry are critical. And that is why the provisions on the technical aspects of switching are such a strong signal to the market that we need greater flexibility and fluidity. And industry consortia like yours, like Gaia-X, can add real value to this process by putting forward some of the deliverables, such as open interoperability specifications. Now, the Act does empower us, the Commission, to build a central repository of standards on the interoperability of data processing services. This will recognize both harmonized standards and common specifications, which is the work of consortia like Gaia-X. I mentioned that because some questions have been raised as to whether Gaia-X would ever have the role of a formal standard-setting body. It doesn't need to. The industry lead with regard to common specifications is just as influential in the current data standardization environment and interoperability environment that we are creating in Europe. Also, there will be, within the publication of the repository for specific service types, we will also have that critical mass that is created by industry developing common specifications, when it exists in a given area, then that specific format will need to be followed by the industry. And that's a strong harmonization effect which can come from the bottom up. Again, a role which Gaia-X can play. I could go on about the various merits of the Data Act in this specific area, but now the proof is in its implementation, and I would call on all of you here to help us in that. Where we do identify major gaps, we of course can also launch a standardization mandate, but that would also allow formalizing open interoperability specifications. So with the support of government, with the support of the Commission, and the role which industry plays in European standardization organizations, again, this is a track for you as industry to justify the expense and the resource that you're putting into Gaia-X, because it will give rise to clarity, transparency, and certainty with regard to the actual technical standards which will rule this industry, rule this sector across Europe, and anybody who wishes to play in that space. So we count on your support, but we hope that you also see the benefits for you individually and collectively in ensuring that this interoperability is a reality. Then moving on to the data spaces. Don't worry, you've all seen this slide before, and I'm certainly not going to go into details. But it's because we sowed the seed for what would be a series of data spaces in strategic fields. Today, and the count isn't finished, but we have a target to create an ecosystem of 14 interoperable data spaces in the strategic sectors: mobility, energy, agriculture, health, and the list goes on. And the goal is that together, the data spaces will form a single, albeit of course distributed, federated but secure European data space, a genuine single market for data. And that's why I was really happy to hear what I listened to in the previous sessions, which is that there has been a tendency to go for silos. There has been a tendency for certain industries and sectors to say, we're special, we have needs which differentiate us from everybody. No, that would be to remove one of the key value propositions of European data spaces. Of course you will have control over secure data. Of course there will be data protection. But it is the pooling of the data, it is the reuse of this data in a secure environment that will create huge value for other sectors which may not have been imagined in your industry. That is very important. Now, I won't dwell on that further because, again, implementation is so key. Because to get there, we are, of course, making our contribution through the initiatives, but they are not the data spaces created in a vacuum. There is European Union data legislation. We heard about that in the session this morning. And that regulatory framework must be understood by, but well coordinated with, the work that stakeholders such as Gaia-X are doing. Of course, we're hopefully also putting our money where our mouths are, and that is by devoting, for example, the Digital European Programme as a key weapon or tool in the creation of the common data spaces. We are supporting the Data Spaces Support Centre, to which you, Gaia-X, are an active contributor. And it is, as Boris Otto said just a few minutes ago, it is playing a pivotal role, and it's not a single point of failure, but it is obviously a key contribution to underpinning the work of the data spaces, but also making sure that they do actually work together, that interoperability works, that there is nobody going off in their own direction and creating new silos, so that we do have these populated data spaces for the benefit of Europe. Standards will obviously play a key role in that. I've mentioned the role with regard to standards. We are establishing a European Data Innovation Board, which is to coordinate national practice and policies on the topics covered by the Data Governance Act, including, of course, the prioritization of cross-sectoral standards. Now, you, Gaia-X, have already demonstrated that sectoral data spaces, they're no longer just a theoretical concept. Many of you have actually been involved in private sector data spaces. We're not trying to colonize or take over control. We are trying to provide a framework for transparency and stability, so that that investment will actually pay off for you and for the users of the data. We continue to encourage Gaia-X to drive forward the important work on interoperability, and of course to play the role that you are playing in the Data Spaces Support Centre. Now, as we've just seen, as part of the Data Space Business Alliance, you're working with Fireware, with IDSA, BDFA, to pool resources and experience. And I can say very clearly, as it is something which I've discussed with my big boss, is that we are a firm supporter of these initiatives, and we really do appreciate the efforts. But particularly by the fact, and we've just seen it on the previous session, that you recognize the need to work together, and you are modest enough to accept that no one entity or organization can achieve our goals on your own. But even for a champion in data spaces such as Gaia-X, there's more to be done. We're going to give you more challenges. In the first case, it's the creation of the European Digital Infrastructure Consortia, the EDICs. That is an attempt to provide the possibility for long-term sustainable structures, a framework for each of the data space activities. We want them to be a tool for coordination, for locking in funding from member states, but also for ensuring the long-term interoperability and coherence between the data spaces in general. So that's, again, a contribution we're making, a tool that we are providing, and I would encourage you to look actively at this. Another tool that we are working on, and has been mentioned, but here I think we have to have what, well, I did start my life as a COBOL programmer, so I can say disambiguation, because we saw the very interesting presentation from our Spanish colleagues earlier on about the project coming from the transport sector of simple in Espanol, simple. This is another one. We've taken the E away, but this is our smart middleware platform for the interconnection and interoperability of data spaces. As they come to fruition, we wanted to ensure that there was a single common framework for the interoperability, while again recognizing the need in some cases to augment or to add on to what should be a common harmonized interoperable framework. So that is a framework that will be funded under the digital program. We're at a critical delivery stage in designing and then delivering the technical platform which is necessary to provide those common services, to allow their provision, rather, of the common services. It's a public good. Simple will be an open source software solution, free of charge and available to everybody. It's smart middleware, as I've said. It will allow the federations, and therefore it is just another building block in this complex but hopefully coherent framework that we are building together. Recently we awarded the framework contract for the development of Simple. We now have 2 consortia who won that contract, and they are currently presenting themselves for the first specific contract, which will go into production in January of next year. We hope for proof of concept by June or July, and a minimum viable project by November, which should lock in at the same time many of the EDICs as they come on stream. We know that in the data spaces, many of you have been doing work, but what I can say, I have to keep myself independent of the procurement process for strict legal reasons, but we have very, very positive expectations with regard to the convergence between Simple and the work done in Simple, the work done in Gaia-X, I beg your pardon. So finally, after hitting you with a lot of that, taking the opportunity to look back in order to look forward. Now, some of the panelists from Gaia-X itself were asked the difficult question this morning about looking forward for 10 years. I think we can focus on the next year. It's very, very exciting. Some of you will have CFOs saying to you, where is the concrete output? What is happening? After the 3 years of work, hard work that has been done, I think that both with regard to the data strategy, but more importantly, Gaia-X, now we will see the concrete fruits of your labor. The investment will pay off. Hopefully, we will see some of the players, be they companies, sectors, and even member states, who've been sitting on the edges, skeptically waiting for something to show. They will suddenly realize very soon in the coming months that not only do they need to get in on the act, that they might actually be a little bit late, as you, the first movers, will actually draw the principal benefits from this cooperation. And that is why I could list all of the things here, but this is the modest list of things that the Commission has put as a framework for the work. This does not replace or deliver on the concrete iterations that are the data spaces and the work that goes around them. We have the Data Governance Act and the Data Act. We have also, with the Industrial Data Edge and Cloud Alliance, have a strategic roadmap for cloud and edge. Member states have forwarded their best practices. I've talked about the simple middleware. The edicts are on the way. All of that to create a more permanent, sustainable infrastructure for data sharing and for data spaces. The IPCEI will hopefully be announced very soon, and that will also give a further impetus to forward-looking research and innovation, but quickly going to innovation and implementation with regard to next-generation edge computing, which of course will provide another essential tool for extracting value, full value, from European data spaces. We will look at the data processing infrastructures. Obviously, there are software and data sharing tools that have yet to come. But all of this is now mapped, and we hope that you see a place for yourself there. We hope that industry recognizes its input in that mapping. And I would stress once again that you have a role to play. You can continue to input to that work even as you implement. The work of Gaia-X, therefore, will continue not only in its practical implementation, but also as a guiding light with regard to feedback from industry. But for now, certainly from my perspective, the emphasis must be on implementation. The Commission has hit you with a very long list of things to do over the last few years. And before we develop further visions, we have to ensure that concrete is delivered concretely in a very, very rapid time frame. It means preparing the ground for implementation and monitoring, particularly of the Data Act, and of course delivering simple so that you have all the tools. For Gaia-X, if you will allow me speak to you, it means continuing your work on concrete deliverables and using that, using your reach, your footprint, to play a coordinating role when it comes to the creation of data spaces in and for Europe. And for both of us together, it means that we must continue talking and working together on the next steps in building a genuine single market for data for the good of all. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for all your work.